Okay, as we study this lesson, we're looking at deacons. We've been talking about the distinct nature of the church. And I think it's a key thing to realize that God has designed the church in a certain way in the New Testament and has given us directions how that we ought to direct it and to organize the church so that it can be of service for Him and also for us as members. And one of the things that we've been talking about is the different roles within the church. And one of the roles we've been talking about specifically here is the role of a deacon. Now, deacons are given a great responsibility. We don't want to really look at it as a lot of people maybe look at it as more of a political office. If you look at the denominational world, many times it's a very political office. It's the leadership office, quote unquote. They usually are the ones that maybe even set up guidelines for churches and things like that. And they're usually under the direction of a board of deacons, under the direction of the pastor, quote unquote. Which usually the pastor, when they're referring to the preacher, not necessarily somebody, as we studied prior lessons about pastors and what the definition and what God's design is for them. But we want to look at the roles of deacon, because the deacons play a big part. As the church grows, and as the church within any congregation grows, the growth necessary for the many needs that pop up, many physical needs that pop up, that are getting many times left aside if the congregation's focused on evangelism, which is the main focus, by the way, of the church, is evangelism. So the deacon's role comes into play in such a way that it causes the church not to be hindered by having to deal with those that might be the ones that are the most evangelistic or reaching out in the community, taking away from that responsibility, coming back and actually having to serve tables. And don't want to diminish the importance of serving tables. God certainly wants the needs and physical needs of a congregation to be taken care of. Where our example we get this, and we talked about this last week, so I'll briefly go over it, is in chapter 6 of the book of Acts, verses 1 through 6. Just to bring us in remembrance of...
Would you say that again?
In Acts chapter 6, verses 1 through 6.
Okay, thanks.
The church here had grown, in Jerusalem church had grown in leaps and bounds. If you remember, on the day of Pentecost, how many people were baptized in the church?
3,000.
Okay, 3,000 on the first sermon. Now that's what you call a great, that must have been one great sermon, and it was very distinct, and it caused people to repent and to leave basically the Jewish religion and to realize that the formulation of God's new design, His New Testament religion, and that was Christianity, had begun. And so 3,000 people became Christians. Not long after that, we see in the book of Acts, it talks about how many other people, a particular number that popped up.
5,000.
There was another occasion, there was 5,000 that were baptized. And so now there's 8,000 people that we know of, and I'm sure there was far more, because this was on one occasion. So in 2 occasions, there's 8,000. Now you take the wives and the children and all those that would be a part of this congregation, all of a sudden, as the congregation moves forward, what's some of the problems that might exist?
Somebody gets overlooked.
Yeah, somebody could get overlooked. Somebody can start feeling like, we're not getting what we, need. And by the way, many of these people had traveled from long distances to come to the day of Pentecost, the Jewish high day of worship. They came to this occasion, and so they were out of town, basically. And so there was a lot of needs that were arising from that. Number one is if they were farmers, for instance, over in other areas, they wouldn't have the means of food. They wouldn't have the garden variety of things, to serve them. And so there was one of the immediate things came up was the service that was needed to be given. And specifically, to the widows. And so this is where this passages actually come up. So as we read this, let's go ahead and read that. And it's in chapter 6, 1 through 6. Deb, you want to read it?
Now at this time, while the disciples were increasing in number, a complaint arose on the part of the Hellenistic Jews against the native Hebrews, because their widows were being overlooked in the daily serving of food. So the 12 summoned the congregation of the disciples and said, "It is not desirable for us to neglect the word of God in order to serve tables. Therefore, brethren, select among you 7 men of good reputation, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, whom we may put in charge of this task. But we will devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word." The statement found approval with the whole congregation, and they chose Stephen, a man full of faith and of the Holy Spirit, and Philip, Prochorus, Nicanor, Timon, Parmenas, and Nicholas, a proselyte from Antioch. And these they brought before the apostles, and after praying they laid their hands upon them.
Okay. So what occasion came up?
The widow thing.
Okay, there's the widows. In specific, they spoke of as the Hellenistic Jews. Now, apparently they were different sects of Jews that were there in this particular case. And this one particular group felt like they were being not served properly or not given their daily food lot. And what's that? Yeah, discriminated. That's the word I'm looking for. They were being discriminated against. They felt. Now, I'm not saying they were, but they obviously, yes.
There's a meaning for the word Hellenistic, and I can't remember it. Does anybody?
Greek.
It's Greek.
Greek. Yeah, the Grecian widows.
Yeah, Grecian is what the King James refers to.
Oh, okay. Did I?
Hellenistic means Grecian widows.
Just a minute. Hellenistic Jews against the native. Yeah, the native. Yeah, and if you look over, I have mine.
Probably from Helen.
Those born in
Greek
lands other than
Are
Palestine.
you
Right.
serious, Jay?
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Are
the,
you serious?
Yeah.
I can never tell.
Yeah, these were
Sometimes Jay smiles.
Greek-speaking Jews probably, and speaking Greek, they were under the influence of the Greek culture, and so they were considered different by the Hebrew-speaking Jews.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
Still be considered outsiders.
Yeah.
okay, so they apparently, the people that were being served were the native Jews, Jewish widows, and so this particular group felt like they were being shunned or not being taken care of. Now, we don't know if that was the fact or not. You know, it could very well have been they weren't getting their daily food, but there might have been others that weren't getting their daily food, because here again, look at this great response of people that are now a part of the church. And so the idea behind it was the problem became a real issue. Now, I understand that it mentions here the 12. It was brought up to the 12. What 12 are they talking about? The apostles. Now, what is the apostles? What was their commission they were given by Jesus himself?
Spread the gospel.
Okay, he said to go into all the world and preach the gospel. Those that believe and are baptized shall be saved. So he basically told them their mission. Okay, and they were doing their mission apparently very well. But what happens when you take anyone that is in a role of a minister to be evangelistic, and you strap upon them, hey, by the way, you know, this benevolence committee, you know, is kind of falling down, and, you know, you need to take responsibility over that. And oh, by the way, you know, there's a lot of people in the hospital. You need to visit all those people.
They get so bound up with the little stuff that
Okay.
they can't do what they were.
This is what happens in a lot of congregations of the church even today. The minister comes in, and his job is to minister the word.
Amen.
He's a minister of words. His goal is to build up the congregation and to evangelize. Not everyone. That doesn't mean that everyone else doesn't have to do anything in that area. It just means that's his primary job. And specifically the apostles, it was their primary job. And so the reality of it is these people they were having all these needs, and what was happening? These apostles were starting to have to take care of these needs. You know, they didn't want people to feel like they're being shunned. And so, can you imagine 12 men trying to take care of all this, plus minister the words of the gospel out to a lost and dying world. It was an impossibility. So what was necessary? They said, we need a resolution to this problem. Okay, so you choose, how many?
7.
7, that's a good number. 7 people that, men of good rapport, good reputation, that we might put in charge of this. Now, you don't see the word deacon here, but where does the root word deacon come from? It's from our Bibles.
No, it's a servant.
Okay, it's diakonoi,
Which literally means a table servant.
which really means the true definition of the word from a noun standpoint is table server. Someone, in other words, takes care of physical needs. That's the definition. Now, it also in the verb form means to serve. It means a servant. And so here they get this job that's necessary and say that we want to put these men in charge of this table service, basically. So this is where the word diakonoi would originate from.
Were they just putting the 7 in charge of the widows? That's what I'm getting at.
Yes,
Is
that was
what
their
it
specific job.
Okay, 'cause
They had a specific job. Here again now, understand, it's just like in the preaching realm, the apostles weren't the only ones preaching.
right.
There were a lot of other people that were preaching the information that they already received. But they were the most qualified people, obviously, to preach. In the same regards, these particular servants were not the only servants. But they had a specific designated job, and that was to take care of these Grecian widows.
Now, is that somewhere else where the qualification of a widow, though, is 60 and up, and she had no family to take
Right.
care of her?
Yeah, now see, understand that. It wasn't like, the members of the church, all of a sudden there's widows, and they say, all right, we got to take care of the widows. Because the Bible instructs us in other areas that if a widow is truly a widow, number one, she had to be over 60, she had to be faithful Christian, washing the feet of the saints. In other words, she'd been in great service to the church already, and has no relatives to take care of her. So understand, you think, well, 8,000 people, how many widows are going to be? There's going to be a lot of them. Well, they're not talking about taking care of all of them. We're only taking care of the ones that are unable to take care of themselves and they have no family. Always understand that. It's just like the benevolent program as a whole. The Bible talks about benevolence as being something that we ought to do. But there's a level of benevolence that we need to realize everyone can have needs. But everyone has a responsibility to fulfill their own needs and to try to do what they can to help others also.
Larry?
But they weren't just ones that just sat back home. By the way, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I got to go out and do a benevolence run one time in church, and I brought in groceries to people. They sat and watched television, and a big screen television, and their refrigerator was full of beer, and they had cartons of cigarettes and stuff there. Now, let me tell you what, that doesn't fulfill me as saying that is a true needy person. Here again, understand, benevolence is for those that are unable to take care of their own needs themselves. Okay, but anyway, yes.
I want to commend like Deb and Rob and Scott and Jan, like they have taken care of their parents. And
Yeah.
sadly, that's something that's gone by the wayside. Unless you can't take care of course, they go to a rest home. But it fascinated me, again, from the South, that was just automatic. You took your family in. And then when Julianne and Rick got married, her mother kept saying, now, is this the time that we make that commitment? Because in their culture, the husband makes the commitment to both mothers that he will always take care of them if something were they, so Rick, he says, yeah, Rick, you got to remember that. You have made a commitment that you will
it was at the reception.
Yes.
Reception at Rick's wedding, and of course, if you don't know, she's Chinese background.
Right, it's very serious.
And it's a very serious thing. You take on the responsibility of that family.
Yes.
So, if she needs a place to live, then Rick is responsible to take care of her.
Right.
And then Julianne, in the same way, if we need to be taken care of,
Right.
they are to take care of us.
Even when they were in China, there was the family, children, and there was these little kids, and they said, if we become the need of bringing our 5-year-old to America, you are to take care of him or her.
Yeah,
So they can go to school here.
yeah.
It's just an automatic thing, you do that for people.
Yeah, you marry more than just a person. Not like this culture, you know.
Entire family.
Yeah, you marry the whole family.
Hopefully it's a small family.
They can
Oh,
only
yeah,
have,
right.
they're only
Well, in
allowed,
China it is. We
they're only
only have
allowed
one
one
kid.
child.
But they're only allowed so many
Yeah.
in China.
Well, you have to pay for the second one. No.
Well, they're only allowed one.
have to
They
pay
can
for
have
one.
two. They have to pay a $50,000 fine.
Is that to
Yes.
control the population?
And if they work for the government,
Yeah,
they're automatically
they used to
fired.
board them if they weren't
If
employed.
they work for the state anyway, they lose their job. Anyway, let's go back away from that. But
Wow.
Yeah.
I find that an amazing contrast, the way God instructs his people in the church particularly to take care of the needy, and the contrast with the idea today that everyone is entitled for the government to take care of them.
Yeah. Now, see, that's a scary situation because you don't want, what was it, the old saying? We're getting a little political here. When you become dependent upon a government, you can, never mind. I forgot what it was.
If they have the power to take care
You'll
of
lose.
your need, they have the power to take away everything you have.
Right,
That's
in
right.
other words, yes.
That's right.
That was
Thomas
kind
Jefferson
of
said that.
the philosophy behind it. And so we need to always be careful. And that's why it's so important for those members of the church to step up, the families of the church, to take care of those within their family's needs. You know, that comes first. And then outside of that, then we need to start taking care of those that are unable to take care of themselves. All right. Okay, so this is what their particular task. These men were chosen of good rapport, and he says, number one, they told the congregation to put them forward. They put them forward, and the apostles laid their hands upon them, and they were given this responsibility. Okay, now just to let you know, just a little side note, was this the only job that these 7 men did?
No.
We know that's not the only thing they did, because what happens to one of them right away?
He's preaching.
He ends up preaching.
Yeah, Philip, you find him on
You find him on the Damascus, or not
the
Damascus.
Gaza Road, and he's preaching to the Ethiopian eunuch, and later we find him with his daughters, and he's preaching.
So he did other things too, but anyway, but he was assigned to do a specific work, and that was something, that was his quote unquote, that was his ministry. That was his chosen ministry.
It's his responsibility.
That was his responsibility to take care of. Okay. All right, now let's go over in real quick, because I'm trying to get through this today. Let's go over into 1 Timothy chapter 3. First Timothy chapter 3. Yeah, I'm going to let somebody else read. You already read. Goodness.
Well, at least I'm on the ball.
Thank goodness you do want to read it, because that saves me from stumbling through it. Especially when I give you one with all those names.
8-13.
Yeah, go ahead and read that.
Okay. Likewise must the deacons be grave, not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy of filthy lucre, holding the mystery of the faith in a pure conscience. And let these also first be proved. Then let them use the office of a deacon, being found blameless. Even so must their wives be grave, not slanderers, sober, faithful in all things. Let the deacons be the husbands of one wife, ruling their children and their own houses well. For they that have used the office of a deacon well purchase to themselves a good degree and great boldness in the faith which is in Christ Jesus.
Okay. So there's a list of requirements here that they are to, are qualifications. Now this is much later than what we see in Acts chapter 6. These qualifications come afterwards, after Paul decides, he's writing a letter to these ministers of the gospel, Timothy, and sending him out into congregations, and wherever he sees the need that's there, to appoint deacons, appoint overseers or elders or pastors and deacons. And the deacons were given responsibilities to serve the tables. Now, but there, he wanted to make sure that he got men that were qualified. And so what he did, he gave a list here of things they need to be. And that is, number one, they need to be, what was the first word? Somebody have a modern translation? I got grave.
Blameless.
Okay, blameless, okay?
There you go.
In other words, someone who is without blame, or someone who obviously is not someone that's constantly being accused of things that find out there's some truth to it. So in other words, they have to be somebody of good reputation. Not double-tongued. What does it mean not to be double-tongued?
Well, not to say one thing and to one person say something else to another person.
Yeah, we probably got a bombardment of double-tonguers out here right now in the media.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're on television, they're on the radio,
And I take that.
and they're many times, and I'm not saying all of them, but I'm saying a lot of them, they say one thing, promise one thing, do another, and
That's what I was
they're
gonna
usually
say.
normally called
Double
politicians.
tongue means to say one thing, but what you do doesn't even resemble what you say.
Right.
Isn't that hypocrisy?
Yes,
It's hypocritical, yeah,
Yes, it
that's hypocrisy. But the reality of it is
To be split-tongued is to be like the snake with devil.
Yeah.
right, double tongue means, put it into modern terms, is when you talk to somebody and say one thing, and then you talk to somebody else and say another. In other words, you're undependable of believing what you say.
They kind of change the rules depending who they're talking to.
Yeah.
And the rules that they follow aren't necessarily the rules that they preach, so.
Right, so it's important that a deacon not be double-tongued, okay? Not given to much wine, okay? So what does it mean not to be given to much wine?
Not to be a drunkard.
Okay, not to be a drunkard. In other words, they become very undependable if they're drunkards. They are not of good rapport either, third of that. Okay, another one is not greedy or, what's this, after solid gain, or
Not
Filthy.
violent.
what?
I think some of them.
Mine says filthy lucres.
Yeah, mine does too.
Okay, we normally don't think of it that way,
That'd
but
be
in other
ill-gotten
words,
gains.
not a lover of money, that's another one that's said.
And they cheat people and you know,
Okay.
always make sure they
It
come
doesn't
on
mean-
top of the deal.
It doesn't mean that they have money, or don't have money. What it means is it's not their focus, that they'll do anything to get it. In other words, so they need to be somebody that is free of that, because a lot of times, that's like any other addiction. It can be that which causes you to center your life around it. And pretty soon, that's your focal point. Okay, they are to be strong in the faith. Okay, they need to be faithful men. Let me get mine here.
And they can be young men, can't they? Because it says children, and the children are to be submissive in their household.
Well, yeah, they usually are, many times are younger men.
They're the ones that have the strength.
They're the
Plus
ones
of
that
the
have the
job.
strength to do it.
Right.
Yep. They also, yeah, but it does qualify them here that they must have, let's see, must have wives
And it's
and manage
one at a
their
time.
children well.
One
Okay.
wife at a time.
One wife,
What does that automatically disqualify from being?
From a deacon, would disqualify women.
Women, because a woman can't have a husband, can't have
A husband,
A wife.
she can't have a
can't
wife.
have wife, so it automatically.
A lot of people misunderstand when verse 11 says, wives must likewise be dignified and not malicious gossip, temperate, faithful in all things, and let the deacons be husbands of one wife. They think, oh, it's got qualifications for the women too, so it must be they can be deacons too. That's not what it's talking about. What it's talking about is the wives of these deacons need to be not this way. You know, they're not to be someone who is malicious gossips, and they need to be dignified, and they need to be temperate
Why do
and
you
faithful in all
Why do you
things.
think that is, Brother Larry?
Well, certainly, if you look at it from a standpoint of the service they're going to be offering, they're going to have a really hard time fulfilling their mission and being a good servant if they have a wife that is basically tearing down, causing trouble within the church, causing all kinds of problems. So therefore, they would not be good candidates.
And being a deacon's hard work, takes a lot of time and
Yeah,
effort.
so they're gonna have to be someone who realizes their husband's gonna be busy doing some things, yes.
Isn't the husband supposed to be the spiritual leader of the family?
Absolutely. Yeah, the husband is supposed to be the spiritual leader, so certainly, if he's not, then he probably didn't qualify to be a deacon.
But it doesn't take away that she can't be helpful in
Oh,
that
no.
way also.
Don't ever think, someday, okay, all right, you have that job, so I don't do nothing. It's kind of like the ministry, the gospel ministry. Just because it's like many congregations hire a full-time minister, and then everybody goes, I don't have to do that anymore. That's not the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be, we're all supposed to go and preach the gospel, to teach the word of God to people. And we're going to be all different levels of ability to teach. But we're all supposed to be that. We're supposed to be the light of the world. And how do you be a light? You be a light by your actions and by your words. And so, certainly doesn't mean that you're not to be a servant. And certainly, and here again, if somebody's appointed to be a deacon and he's in charge of benevolent, does that mean that you don't have to be benevolent anymore?
No.
If you see somebody that has a need and you go take care of it, what did James say? Yeah, you've sinned. When you don't fulfill it, you see someone's need, he says, what good is your faith? Will that faith save you?
Doesn't it say that if a woman marries a man and he's not faithful, that she should be faithful to show him
Right.
how to be?
Absolutely, yeah. A woman can win her husband without saying a word.
That's called letting your light shine.
Yeah, let your light shine before
A
men.
woman can't be a deacon, but the word deaconess does show up.
The word deaconess only shows up in the Revised Standard Version.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, only one version used it.
But
And actually,
it's meant to mean servant, just a
well, it's meant to mean servant. She's a good servant. Paul commends a woman that is a great servant in the church. Here again, does that mean that women can't be servants just because they're not quote unquote a deacon? No. In fact, many women are some of the better servants of the church.
We need to look at the context of the writing to discern whether or not the subject being talked about is the office of a deacon,
Right.
or the role of a servant. And clearly, we all can be servants, but Paul does a pretty good job of clearly describing the qualifications for a deacon.
Usually, when you're appointing deacons, there's usually a need that has arisen, and they need to be appointed to this particular task. In any congregation that gets of any size, you're going to have deacons, a need of deacons, because of the fact there's going to be needs that rise that maybe everybody can't fulfill.
There are not many elders, M-I-N-I. Not in training to be an elder necessarily. They could be a deacon all their lives.
Right, and it's great work, and it's certainly not, doesn't disqualify them someday to become an elder, but it's not a requirement of. Many people look at, well, become a deacon after
Junior.
so many years of service, then we'll make you an elder.
We talked about this last week, about how the two jobs have completely different
More
roles.
responsibility.
Sure.
Job descriptions. They're
Absolutely.
Elders get
So different.
spiritual
Yeah.
needs.
Okay, a lot of people, get confused on that because just before he talks about deacons, he talks about elders and overseers. And so they think, he's basically talking about the different positions in the church, and one's really close to the other, so, after a while you can move up. As they get older, they can move up to be an elder.
But, because I've heard that in a congregation where someone was automatically an elder, and they said, well, he can't be an elder because he wasn't a deacon first.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah,
I've heard that
I
one.
don't see that in there.
I've heard that one live.
yeah, for yourself even.
Okay.
I was told that same thing.
You were told the same thing.
I think it's pretty clear that we're all to be servants. There is an office, of deacon, of an elder. Okay, they're also to be servants, but it doesn't negate the fact that we all should be willing to step up and serve in
Absolutely.
whatever capacity.
Like I said, the deacon's work is designed to take care of the physical needs, whether it be food, and then if you see the lessons here, food, clothing, housing, medical needs, things like that, then the deacons are the ones that can be a part of that service.
And not just always do it
Assign.
themselves, but maybe delegate somebody, when
Well,
the workload
certainly,
gets too high.
Certainly, they just are the ones responsible to make sure it gets done.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they just become, in charge of order everybody else around to do it.
No.
It just means that,
I'm not implying that.
if no one else, if someone else is not taking care of it, it's your job to make sure it's taken care of. Okay, let's look at the questions here, because I want to get through this lesson real quick here.
Oh, a quick question there. Do they just automatically see the need and help, or do they have to go to an elder and ask permission?
No.
No?
Once they're assigned to the responsibility, that's the whole purpose of them, so that those that would be elders or other ministers, evangelists, won't have to be worried about this again.
Okay.
Well, Larry, doesn't that kind of beg a question? Deacons have a task, like in Acts chapter 6, that those men had a specific task to see to the daily distribution of food. In the same way, a deacon today would have a responsibility, and once it's given to him, that's his responsibility.
Right.
And so
You don't need to go to someone else to find out if they can help you.
yeah, exactly.
You don't go to quote unquote the minister and say,
Hey,
I need this taken care of, can you take care of it? And he ends up in an administration role.
yeah, just
You know,
do it.
The whole purpose is they have a particular task they're designed to put in charge of, and therefore they can take care of it. Okay, what is the literal translation of the word diakonoi? Okay. Table servant. Table servant. Okay. All right. What words are used to translate the word diakonois? What words can be used?
Minister.
Okay, minister, servant, or
Deacon.
a deacon. Yeah. Either one of those words. And they are used. And they are used in our New Testament. Okay. Explain the use of the word deacon in Romans 12:7. Now, I think you have to turn there. What's that passage say?
For ministry, let us wait on our ministering, or he that teacheth on teaching.
Okay. So what is the word ministering to minister? It's talking about a servant, service. It doesn't tell though what kind, but it just says, whatever it be, do it. Ministry or minister. So that word, by the way, is from... Huh?
Not referring to preachers.
No, it's just talking about ministry as a whole.
Because we're all ministers, right?
We're all ministers. We all have different ministries.
In
We all are part of the ministry.
Right, part of the main ministry.
In the New American, it uses the word serving.
Sir, I actually use it.
Yes, yeah. In verse 7, it says, if service in serving. So, I mean...
So the root word, the word from the Greek there
Diakonoi.
is diakonoi.
Yep.
Yeah, just to let you know. Okay, explain the use of the word deacon in Romans 16:1. Turn over a few passages.
That one I just read.
16,
No, you read 12. I think.
Colossians 4:17. You did that one?
Romans
A
16:1.
deacon will be seen.
Romans 16:1.
I command to you, Phoebe, our sister, who is a servant in the church of Caesarea.
Okay? So explain the use of the word there. It's basically
A
saying,
deacon will come see Sister Phoebe.
okay, she was obviously one that was well known of serving the church. Whatever that service was, she was serving the church.
She's the one that was referred to in the deaconess in one translation.
Right,
Yes.
that's right. That's the same place. But it's from the Greek.
I knew I'd read it, so
Yeah.
I couldn't find it in my...
I know, you're not going to find it in King James.
I like how the New American translates this, where it says, I commend you, our sister Phoebe, who was a servant of the church, which is at Caesarea. A
Right.
servant of the church.
Right.
And
That's pretty high accommodation if you have an apostle that's referring to someone as being a good servant. within the church. Okay, we won't do number 6 because we've already went through all that. Summarize these words. What is the work of a servant? In your own words. Or excuse me, what is the work of a deacon?
Being a servant of God. To
Okay.
serve whatever need is necessary to serve.
Okay, to be in charge of, or
To meet people's needs, basically.
or take care of those physical needs that are necessary within any particular congregation that you're appointed.
Yeah, it says it on the opposite page.
Yeah, if you want to, yeah, that's not in your own words.
Oh, your own words?
Own words.
In my own words.
You are to faithfully fulfill the mission you're given.
Right, faithfully fulfilled.
Brother Larry?
Yes.
You know, when I think about a deacon, I like to and the way that they serve the church. I think I've used this example a couple weeks ago in here, but it's about like a waitress or a waiter in a restaurant. You know, the waiter in a restaurant doesn't walk up and tell you what you want.
Right.
They listen to what you need. If you need a glass of water, they're the ones that goes and gets it for you. They're the ones who they meet your needs, and that's what a deacon does for the church. Is it recognize? They look ahead. Like a good waitress will come, will look and say, "Hey, they're getting low on water. I better go get I better fill their glass of water."
They have specifically defined
Exactly.
job.
And a deacon will look at the church and say, "Wow, they need some more of this," or "We need to do that." And they'll be looking ahead. They'll be meeting the needs. Oftentimes, before they ever arrive, they're taking care of them. And that's the picture that I have in my mind about a deacon as a waiter or a waitress, and how they meet. What's a good waiter or waitress? You know, what
Somebody's
kind of
attentive.
attentive, caring,
Right.
meet your needs, and that's the way a deacon should be.
Sure, absolutely.
So
You
that
know,
means they know the congregation.
That's right. They should be in tune to the pulse, basically, of the congregation and the needs. You know, because their whole purpose is not to allow it to become a burden on those that are in other roles, especially in the areas of teaching and ministering the Word, the ministry of the Word.
And that wouldn't, like, if they've taken over food or something and that person wants to talk about their
Oh, yeah,
son,
certainly.
Christ, I mean, it doesn't mean they say, well, here's your food and I'm leaving.
I'll tell you what, if I was in the first century, I want Philip to come to my house if I have needs, because I could get a Bible lesson too.
Yeah.
You know? All right. Well, next week, we're going to talk about the patterns of worship, and let's see, and define what worship is. I think it's important for us to realize that God has defined what He wants specifically in the worship itself in the church. And you know, it's always good to go to the source of what is needed, rather than try to create your own. Because if we create our own, they're all going to be different. But our whole study, of course, that we're going through is called the distinct nature of the church. What is the church? How do we know there's a church? I mean, how do we even know there's a religion?
We are the church.
We are the church. How do you know that? Because the Bible tells us. Okay? So for us to be able, we have to be able to define what the church is, what is worship. We don't know. I mean, I come from an atheistic background, and I've told you that many times before. I absolutely knew nothing. Man, I was a clean slate.
Absolutely awesome.
Absolutely knew nothing. I didn't know what different roles were. I didn't know, you know, basically I knew what times to show up, because it had it on the board. If it doesn't have Wednesday night on the board, you have to make sure you find out. For those that come a little late.
Yeah.
Okay.
6 o'clock.
They had
I
some-
guess-
See, that would have been God's design. If He designed that, we would know right where to look.
6 o'clock.
Yeah.
6 o'clock. Gotcha.
That got changed to Tom.
I guess what I get from this
6
whole
o'clock.
lesson is that
6 o'clock.
Yeah.
We know now.
in all of us fulfilling the Great Commission to go out and spread the
Missed
gospel
you.
throughout the world to every creature, there are other needs that arise. So just
Absolutely.
because somebody's given, you brought it up a minute ago, given the office of deacon, or if somebody's considered, you know, one of the women is considered to be a great servant. Every one of us, each one of us as believers, our ultimate responsibility is to spread the gospel to the lost.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's how the church multiplies.
That's how the church.
And that's why it was so critical in Acts chapter 6 for them to find someone to fulfill the physical position
All the little
needed,
things that popped up
because
along
the
way.
word of the ministry of the word was being let down,
Yep.
was not being able to spread. And obviously, without the gospel, the world's lost. If the people don't hear the gospel, then they're not going to be saved. I don't care how good they are. I don't care how dependable they might be. If they don't have the gospel message in them and they haven't learned it and obeyed it, they will be lost. And so that puts a huge burden on the church. So next week, I'm going to be missing in action, and Scott's going to fill in for me, I think. If not, he'll appoint somebody.
Yeah. What Larry said.
Yeah, what I said.
What Larry said.
All right. Well, before we close, Scott, would you read your minds and word for us?